6, which has to do with requirement analysis. How it is done, which are the participants, what are the tools and techniques, everything we are going to talk about as part of this chapter. Before we start off, let's understand the agenda. What are the topics covered, and we are going to discuss in detail. Now, the overview, what exactly requirement analysis phase or process or the knowledge area is all about. Then what is the prioritized requirement, what are the things involved in it. Organized requirement. So when we have a requirement, how do we organize it? Because then we need to think about the better planning. Then specify and model requirements. How that works, how the modeling works. Assumptions and constraints. We need to define, because we are talking about the business requirement, and whenever we talk about a requirement, we need to see all the hidden factors, which could be someone's assumption or your own assumption or constraint. Once we do all these things, then it's time to verify the requirement and then validate the requirement. So these are the different aspects of the requirement review or requirement analysis which we are going to talk about. Let's move on the overview perspective. Again, according to the body of knowledge or the business analysis, this knowledge area describes the task and the techniques used by the analyst, which is a business analyst, who analyze stated requirement in order to define the requirement capabilities for the solution, for the future solution which we are thinking about, to satisfy the stakeholders' need. Now, in addition to it, analysis may be performed to develop model of current state of the organization. What exactly mean by current state? Current state means as is, how it is working today. Domain model are useful for validating the solution scope with business and technical stakeholders, for analyzing the current state of the organization to identify opportunities for improvement, assisting stakeholder in understanding the current state. So overall, in a nutshell, if you try to understand, it talks about before you proceed, before you move on, you need to understand the current state. You need to understand the current state of the project. That is the key. That is very important. Okay, and that's where the business analyst works with the technical team stakeholders to identify the opportunity and then work on the requirement and work on the model to understand the current state. This is the, I would say, overall picture of the requirement analysis input-output process, which we are, some of the input or output we have already discussed. Some of them we are going to talk about in detail. Prioritize requirement. When we say prioritize requirement, means first understand the purpose. Why do we have to prioritize the requirement? First, let's understand that. Prioritization of requirement ensures that analysis and implementation efforts focus on the most critical requirement. So again, as it says, prioritization is more about how to ensure the analysis and the implementation effort. Because if you do not analyze, let's say you have 5 requirements. Out of 5 requirements, if you do not assess or do not identify the most critical requirement, there is no way you can identify that which is the one which you need to do it first. And that is the overall purpose, to have this prioritization done as part of the analysis process. Description. Description is requirement prioritization is a decision process used to determine the relative importance of requirement. The importance of requirement may be based on their relative value, risk, difficulty of implementation, or on the criteria. So again, as it says, the prioritization involves different things. And the number one thing is You need to know the difficulty of implementation, how difficult it is to implement anything. Relative value means you can only say something is very useful and this must be developed when you can identify the relative value, what value addition it is going to do as part of the business. Now, other than that, you have something called criteria. Criteria could be anything. Criteria could be this defect is so critical that you cannot live without it. So there could be any additional criteria, or this could be a mandate. So then there is no control. It must be done by XYZ date. So then there is no option left with you to say that, okay, no, how to prioritize this. And these are the things which we are going to understand that, okay, what are the different things we need to understand when we are doing the requirement analysis and work on the prioritization. This image just talks about the prioritized requirement input-output diagram. So as you see, most of the things we have already covered as part of chapter 2 or as part of chapter 5. Outside of that, what else are we going to study? We are going to study about that what are the tasks, what is the final outcome do we get as part of it. Input. If you see, previously we have studied about business case. So business case is coming from somewhere which is getting used as a input in this chapter, in this knowledge area. So in the previous chapters you will see we have studied about business case, we have studied about business need, we have studied about requirement, what exactly the requirement is, how that is going to work, requirement management plan, stakeholders. Now business case, again on a high level you need to understand that how to make it and how to add value so that it can become a goal or it is in line with the objective or the goal. So as it says here, business case states the key goals and measures of success for a project or organization, and priorities should be aligned with these goals and objectives. Business need, what is business need? Why do we have to do that? That why, you need to understand that. So as it says, serves as an alternative to the business case if no business case has been defined. So if there is no business case, then we need to make sure that we are able to showcase the business need that automatically suffice the overall objective why we are doing this effort, why we are working on it. Then the requirement. Requirement is the actual work, actual expectation, actual detail which is expected to enhance the current system, enhance the current process. And how we can do that? We can only do that by doing the requirement analysis. Any requirement may be prioritized at any point in its life cycle. Requirements prioritization require that requirements have been stated by stakeholder. However, requirement may not have been fully analyzed or in their final form. Requirement management plan defines the process that will be used to prioritize requirement. We have studied very detailed requirement management plan, how it should be in the previous chapters. So that is getting used as an input. So overall, how the requirement will be managed, how it is going to work, that's what it comes down to. Okay. Then we have the stakeholders. Stakeholders are again anyone who have a negative or your positive impact on the project. Any piece of information can positively or negatively impact the overall project. That's what the stakeholder is all about. Moving on. Elements. Now what are the elements involved? Number one, basis of prioritization. When we talk about basis, we have several bases for the prioritization. There are multiple criteria which we can say. Business value, business or technical risk, any difficulty in terms of the implementation, likelihood of success. The moment we say likelihood of success, automatically you can think about likelihood of failure. So that goes hand in hand. Regulatory or policy compliance. Then you have relationship to other requirements. Then you have stakeholder agreement and the urgency towards the end. Let's understand business value. Business value is when you do this, what value your organization is going to get. So there is something called cost-benefit analysis. Think about it. If you spend $100, if you are not getting any return back, which is more than $100, there is no point of doing it. So it's very important that we have a business value, and you can get the business value by doing the cost-benefit analysis to find out what will be the additional value, what will be the relative value for an organization if this work is done. So the approach prioritizes requirement based on cost-benefit analysis of their relative value to the organization. The most valuable requirement will be targeted for development first. This approach is common when enhancing an existing solution that already meets specified minimal requirement or when delivering the solution incrementally. So now we are good with business value. Now we are talking about business or technical risk. Let's talk about the business or technical risk. This approach selects requirements that present the highest risk of project failure. Those requirements are investigated, implemented first to ensure that if the project fails, it does so after as little expenditure as possible. Why do we identify the risk? We do that. The sooner we identify the risk, the sooner we assess the problem, the better it would be for the project, because then we will be able to first assess the overall risk to say whether it is idealistic situation to proceed with it or not. If it is, then according to that we can make a decision whether to proceed with the problem or not. Now, then we have the implementation difficulty. Implementation difficulty comes with so many things. How? Implementation difficulty comes with so many things because when you are doing and when you are talking about it, then you need to understand that if you do not know that how feasible the solution would be, you cannot. So there is an interdependency. When you are assessing the risk, there is an interdependency. You can have a very major risk by not identifying the right solution. So these are interdependent processes where if you have a risk, you can see and you can assess how difficult it would be to implement the solution. Exactly same. So here, let's understand. Let's read through what it says. In implementation difficulty, this approach selects requirements that are easiest to implement. This approach is often selected during a pilot of new development process or tools or when rolling out a package solution, as it allows the project team to gain familiarity with those things while working on lower risk requirement. When this is done, when you are in the very initial phase of that, something called a pilot. Pilot means you're trying to see what you're going to develop, how it works on a small scale, so that you have a less expenditure, less work. Regulatory or likelihood of success. What exactly it means? Likelihood of success means that, okay, if we are going to do this work, what is the percentage we can think about will be our success rate? So this approach focuses on environments that are likely to produce quick and relative certain success. It is common when a project is controversial and early signs of progress are needed to gain support for the initiative. Now, there are some situations what happen where your stakeholders are not willing to proceed with the project. If that is the case, you need to get some confidence so that they can invest further. You can only do that when you can show some positive. How you can show some positive? You can show some positive when you have a small benchmark. Benchmark means your first target is a very small level and you can showcase some achievement. So that's what the likelihood of success is. That relatively you can showcase your success on a small level, so that can help the stakeholders to give little bit of confidence level. But on the other hand, you need to be very careful on these type of situations, because you may get into just trying to get a success on a shorter scale. Sometimes you end up paying a big price of it because you end up doing something which was not expected. Regulatory or policy compliance. What exactly it is? It prioritizes requirements that must be implemented in order to meet regulatory or policy demand imposed on the organization, which may take precedence over other stakeholder interest. So when we are talking about the regulatory and the policy compliance, we always have to think about something called conflict of interest. Conflict of interest, what exactly it means? It means whenever you have some kind of a mandate, some kind of a regulatory issues, then you need to understand that when you are working on these type of regulatory or mandate projects, you need to assess, you need to understand how, when and where something needs to be done before deciding. Sometimes what happens that there are two stakeholders which are not willing to agree to it. If that is the case, that's where it comes as a conflict of interest. And that's where you realize that two stakeholders are not agreeing to each other, and that becomes the tedious situation, that becomes problematic. So that is why all these things you need to assess. Maybe one stakeholder is saying that, okay, no, this is something very important, another stakeholder is not agreeing to that. So that becomes little tricky. And that's nothing but it's a conflict of interest. That's what you call it. So now you have relationship to other requirements. A requirement may not be high value in and of itself, but may support other high priority requirements, and as such may be candidate for early implementation. Now it's talking about dependency. Dependency in the sense, not necessarily what you have, what you are trying to develop, it's a very small piece of work, but that is something that has no value. But it is kind of a first phase. If you don't have that, you can't proceed. Okay, think about it. You have a small web page where you are trying to just create a login and password. Login and password doesn't have much of the functionality per se, okay? But the report is such a big report which you can't even think about it. It's a very huge requirement. But again, you cannot proceed with and concentrate on your report requirement unless you have a login page, because once the user logs in, then only he can get to the report. So your login page takes precedence, even though it's not very important part of the requirement what user is looking for, take precedence over the report. And that is what the relationship kind of a dependency, how it works. Stakeholder agreement. Why do we have to think about stakeholder agreement? Stakeholder agreement is like your approval. Why do you have to have their consensus? You have to have their consensus to make sure that all the requirements which they are working on, which the team is working on, everyone have an agreement to this, okay, that okay, if we do this, this will be the value add which we are going to do it. So as I said, it requires the stakeholders to reach a consensus on which requirements are most useful or valuable. It is often used in combination with one or more of the other approach described above. So stakeholder agreement is very important for the success of the overall project. Now we have the stakeholder requirement. The urgency. Urgency is something that the approach prioritize requirement based on the time sensitivity. Now think about it, that when we have a project and we are working on the project where we need to think about that, okay, we just have 1 month of time. If we don't deliver this, then the penalty would be applied. If those type of situations may arise, then it's a time sensitive information. It's a time sensitive project where no matter what, we must do it. That's what it is. So these are the different elements. There are more, which is challenges. Challenges, why do we have to think about challenges when we are working on the project? We have to think about the challenges because that can again have a good or a bad effect. Most probably it is going to have bad effect if we do not understand and assess the intensity of it. So challenges in facilitating a requirement prioritization session include non-negotiable demand and unrealistic trade-off. What exactly these things are? Non-negotiable demand is your stakeholders attempt to avoid difficult choices, fail to recognize the necessity for making trade-offs, or desire to rank all requirements as high priority. You will find lot of these type of problems when you are working on a project and the stakeholders are not supporting the project because of the implications, because of the complexity or anything like that. So when you see all these type of things, that's where you need to understand and stand up and handle the situation. Because if you are not doing it, the project is going to be big failure and you will not even know that. You are moving towards the negative side of it. So you are a project manager. Either of one has to stand up and take real hard decision over there to understand this. Then you have the unrealistic trade-offs. What exactly the trade-offs are, means what exactly they are looking for to do the trade-off. Solution development team may intentionally or intentionally try to influence the result of the prioritization process by overestimating the difficulty or complexity of implementing certain requirements. This happens a lot. This is a very common thing. That is one of the reasons why IT and the business doesn't go hand in hand. Because sometimes IT will present a small thing in such a big way. It just goes beyond the expectations of the business. Or sometimes it is unintentional, but most of the time it is intentional, where they are just trying to buy some time, they are just trying to manage their resources, whatever they have, and according to that they are going to work. So that's why it goes very tricky when these type of situation comes. That is one of the reasons why you have managers to deal with all these type of situations. Now we are going to talk about techniques. What are the different techniques we have? We have general techniques, then we have Moscow analysis. Moscow analysis is something which is a very interesting analysis which we'll learn over here. Let's understand the decision analysis and the risk analysis. All these topics will be elaborated in chapter 9, but here we are going to understand in a higher level. Now, decision analysis may be used to identify high value requirements. So you are trying to do the decision analysis, but each requirement have some kind of a value. So when you have these type of situations, then what you do? You try to assess that, okay, which is, you rank them, okay, high, low, medium, kind of that way. You rank them so that you understand the value and you pick the highest value one. Same goes for the risk analysis. Requirements that are considered risky may need to be investigated or implemented first, so that if the risk caused the problem to fail, the organization has invested as little as problem at that point. So you first, when you know that something could happen, then you first investigate. You can only investigate when you try to move little deeper towards that risk. So these are the two general techniques. Now we are going to talk about Moscow analysis. This divides requirement into 4 categories: must, should, could, won't category. Must, should, could, would category. Now, why do we have this type of labeling? Why do we have this type of categorization? We have must, which describes the requirement that must be satisfied in the final solution for the solution to be considered a success. Should represents high priority item that should be included in the solution if it is possible. This is often a critical requirement, but one which can be satisfied in other ways if strictly necessary. So, okay, this is something like that. Okay, if I ask you, okay, you must eat, that is kind of a must. You should eat. You should eat means there is still room that if you don't eat, you will survive. But when we say you must eat, that means there is no room for that. No matter what happens, you have to eat. So should gives little bit of flexibility. Could give more freedom that, okay, if you want, you can do it. That's how it is. So this could describe a requirement which is considered desirable but not necessary. This will be included if time and resource permit. So again, this is something of wishful thinking, which gives you little more flexibility, little more freedom, which you can think about it. Now, then you have won't. What exactly it means? Won't, how we are going to access that. It represents you should not be implementing in the given time. The reason why could be anything. The reason could be that, okay, what you are trying to achieve right now, it's not feasible, or there are multiple requirements which you have, which is a higher priority, which takes precedence in the functionality, which takes precedence in terms of the requirement. So there could be X number of reasons why you should not consider about implementing these requirements. So these are the Moscow analysis, why you have must or should or could or won't. So these are the different analysis. The third bullet point which you have as part of your tool is time boxing or budgeting. What exactly that time budgeting is all about? The time budgeting is nothing but where prioritizes requirements for investigation and implementation based on allocation of fixed resources. It is used when the solution approach has been determined. It prioritizes requirements based on amount of work that the project team is capable of delivering in a set period of time. So that's why you have the term as boxing, because you are limiting the time to make sure that, okay, given time frame, this is what I am going to do. I am not going to do it outside of it. So you are limiting it. Then there are a number of approaches that can be taken to determine which requirement can be included in a box iteration. Then there is a category. There is categorization for that. Number one, all in, all out, or selective. Either you have all the eligible requirements with assigned duration or cost. Remove the requirement in order to meet the calendar date or budget limit. So all in means you take all the requirements, but what you do by taking all the requirements, you decided that you do the planning. Planning means you put the cost and the duration, how much it is going to take. When you do that, based on that, it will give you the idea that you have a time limitation. The matter is time sensitive. Now you have the time and the budget for every requirement. The moment you have that, now you will be able to much better assess. If you have 10 requirements, if you have 5 days, how you are going to do it? Because you just have 5 days. In 5 days, which are the requirements you can deliver? So definitely you are going to pick some of them out and going to work it out. Then you have all out. It's just a reverse. Begin with adding the requirement with assigned duration or cost to the calendar or budget. Stop when the calendar dates are met or budget limit is reached. So you have two constraints. You have the calendar date, you have the budget. Either of one is met, you stop the work there. So all in or all out. Selective. So try to understand the difference in these two. You started with taking everything in and then you are removing it. That is all in. All out, you have everything. Now you are getting in. You keep adding the requirement, so you are getting in. So whatever requirement gets in that limitation, the time box, that is in. So all out means you started with outside. All in means you started with inside. That's the difference. Then you have selective. Selective is the more custom defined way of time boxing. How is that? By identifying high priority requirements added to calendar or budget. Add or remove requirement in order to meet the calendar dates or budget limit. So again, this is the custom which you need to understand and which you need to do. Then we have voting. What exactly voting is all about? This method allocates a fixed amount of resources to each participant for them to distribute among proposed features or requirements. So it becomes very tricky when these type of situations happen. So when we say resources, what kind of resources we are talking about? Play money, any other kind of a token, or any kind of a vote. When we are thinking about it, always remember, it's a fixed amount. So the catch over here is fixed amount of resources to each participant. And who will be the participants? The participants will be your stakeholders. For them to distribute among proposed features or requirements. So this is more from the voting perspective, that everyone is getting the equal opportunity and according to that they need to deliver it. That's what the voting is all about. So no one can say, oh, you got more resources, you got less resources to work with. No complaints. Everyone got the exact same amount of attention and everyone have what they were looking for. Then we have stakeholders. Again, I will not go into the stakeholder because again your stakeholders are domain subject matter expert, implementation subject matter expert, then you have the project managers or sponsor or any SME or technical resource, anyone who again have a positive or the negative impact on the project, who can positively or negatively impact the project, are the stakeholders. They all are part of the stakeholder. Moving on to, then we have output. What output we are getting as part of applying all these tools. The output is, we got the final prioritized requirement. Now, a prioritized requirement has an attribute that describes its relative importance to stakeholders and the organization. So now, when we say attribute in the sense, what are the factors which were considered to say that, okay, this requirement is an important priority requirement which we must implement. So that's what this attribute is all about. This is what this attribute is all about. At the completion of this task, each requirement should have an assigned priority. The priorities may apply to a requirement or to a group or related requirements. So again, it could be group requirement, or it could be dependent requirement. It could be any kind of a requirement for which we have got the priority set. Now, before we move on to organize requirements, any question on prioritized requirement?
No.
You're good, Nikita?
Yeah.
You're able to grasp it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so let's move on. We have organized requirements. So now we have prioritized everything. Now we are going to talk about organizing the requirement. Now, what is the purpose? Why are we trying to organize the requirement? We are trying to organize the requirement so that we have a better plan to do that. We have a better plan to manage that. There is a better way to manage the requirement. So the purpose of organizing requirement is to create a set of views of the requirement for the new business solutions that are comprehensive, complete, consistent, and understandable for all stakeholders' perspectives. So why we are organizing it? We are organizing it for multiple reasons. Now, what is the description of it? From the description perspective, there are two key objectives that body of knowledge has given. When we organize the requirement, number one, understand which models are appropriate for the business domain and solution scope. Number two, identify model, interrelationship, and dependencies. So, identify model, interrelationship, and dependency. That means if there is any linkage, identify it. If there is any dependency, identify it. Requirements alone are not complex. It is the relationship and the interdependency among requirements that adds the element of complexity. Therefore, the organized requirements must also clearly depict the inherent relationship between the requirements. So again, what it is trying to say, it's not always about what requirement you have. When you look at the model, how the current system is structured and how it is working, you need to find out something. Where exactly the dependency is all about, where exactly the dependency is. Because maybe your requirement, the unique requirement is not so difficult. It's the dependency, it's the interrelationship with the another module which is the critical thing as part of your implementation. So that is why we say organized requirement means you need to understand that if there is a dependency, if you do not pay attention to the dependency, you may not be able to make a good success on the project because there will be a barrier if you did not fix the dependent item. So this is more from that why we have to organize the requirements. Then we have input for this particular area. Input is your organizational process asset. Yes, what are the template or that everything which you have. Then we have requirements and stated requirements. So now stated means which are confirmed, which are approved, which are well stated and documented and approved. Requirements are stated in various forms as an output from elicitation activity. Stated requirements are the expected desire of stakeholder which must be analyzed to ensure that they reflect a genuine need. So stated requirements, we are very clear. In the data elicitation process also we have stated and unstated. Stated is something which got approved and everyone have consensus on that. Then we have the solution scope. Now solution scope is nothing but it's all about what is being expected from the future scope perspective. So selected requirement model must be sufficient to fully describe the solution scope from all needed perspectives. All needed perspective, what exactly it means? It means all the items which are needed, we must understand about the solution scope and list down all that as part of your solution scope. So all the, see there are something that must do or nice to have. We must have all the requirements, all the details fully documented as part of that, okay, what exactly we need in future. That's what your solution scope is all about. Then this is the overall input and how that gets processed and we get the output. This is the high level picture of it. These are the elements. Your elements are following guideline will assist in promoting consistency, repeatability and a high level of quality. Now, okay, we get that, but what exactly those things are, what consistency we are talking about, what repeatability we are talking about. So it says, follow organizational standard that describes the type of requirement that will be used consistently on project. If no standard exists, the business analyst must select an appropriate set of techniques. So again, I always say that not necessarily every organization is working in the same way. But if it doesn't and you don't find the processes, then define the processes to simplify your life. Then we have use simple, consistent definition for each of the type of requirement described in natural language and using the business terminology that is prevalent in the enterprise. As it says, use simple, consistent definition for each of the type of requirement. Natural language. It's very basic that everyone should be on the same page, and for that you need to make sure you follow the basic norms, and that's what the bullet point 2 is all about. Outside of that, document dependencies and interrelationship among requirements. If we are talking about the document dependencies and interrelationship among requirements, we must understand that dependency could be anything. Dependency could be that, okay, all the failed records cannot be processed if you do not have the workflow to process. That's a dependency. And that's document dependency. Same goes for the interrelationship among requirements. Interrelationship means what? Interrelationship is how, where, and what is connected with each other. There are multiple systems which are dependent on some other application. So if you don't get the input from that system, you are not going to process the data and get the provide the proper output, and that's your dependency. That's your interrelationship among requirements. So if you deliver requirement A, then only you can go to requirement B, because you have to go to B via A. Produce a consistent set of models and templates to document the requirements as described in Specify and Model Requirements, which is chapter 6, which is the next bullet. Right now we are in 6.2. 6.3 is going to explain. Now the first element is level of abstraction. What exactly it means? It means the requirement can be articulated on a number of different levels of abstraction. Requirements are frequently described as needed to say what needs to be done, not how to do it. That is a very big and very important saying for the business analyst. The reason being is, when you are writing the requirement, always remember what is needed, not how you are going to do it. Because you are writing the requirement and you are saying that this is what the future need is. How to do it, that's not the business analyst job. That is something altogether different area who has to decide how to achieve what is expected. That's not your job. So level of abstraction is exactly what it is. Then we have model selection. Model selection, and under model selection you have user class, profile, role. Then you have concept and relationship. Then you have events. Let's first understand what exactly user class, profile, or role. User class, for this we are going to study in detail in chapter 9. But again, on a high level, if we need to understand, it says that model categorize and describe the people who directly interact with the solution. So why do we have to? That's what the user class is all about. So in each role or group together, people with similar need, expectation, and goals. Each role is likely to correspond to a stakeholder and should be investigated as a source of requirement. These are usually identified by performing conduct stakeholder analysis and are used in a number of analysis models, particularly in organization model, process model, and use cases. So we are saying that, okay, who will have what level of access, how that is going to work, what is the each stakeholder's expectation, what is each group expectation. All these things are bundled up together as part of this model selection process under use case, profile, or role. Concept and relationship. Concepts usually correspond to something in the real world, a place, person, thing, or an organization. They define the objective, entities or facts that are relevant to the business domain and what relationship they have with other concepts. Data models expand on this to also describe the attribute associated with a concept. Concept and relations is nothing. First, always understand whatever we have identified as an object which we are going to use to towards the domain, towards the business, we must understand that each concept have its own attribute. And when you have your own attribute, that means you need to understand that how you are utilizing the concept, what exactly is the relation, because there could be something which you need to be worried about when you are designing the model. You can only design the model when you understand the relationship very clearly. If you don't understand the relationship very clearly, you can't design the model. You can't even sketch the concept, what is the concept which you are expecting. Then we have events. What exactly is event? Event is a request to a business system or organization to do something such as customer placing an order, a manager requesting a report, can be described as an event. Event means which triggers the process. Event means which triggers the process. That's what exactly it is. Now, when we are talking about this, the organization must respond to an event, and in most cases, an event will trigger or affect a business process. Now, always event means which triggers something. That's what the event is all about. So if you are ordering something in a restaurant, that means you triggered something which is going to initiate the process, which is going to work on the process, which is going to start the process. That is what the event is. Now, in an IT world, if you need to understand, let's understand what is an event. Event is something, let's say, you trigger the event when you click on the enter button. You will initiate the process. Or let's say you are filling out the form. When you are filling out the form, there is a save button and there is a delete button. Now both can trigger the event. If you click on save, it is going to take all the cumulative data and going to save that. That is that event which will trigger, which will get triggered when you click on the save button. Same goes for the delete. Delete is an event which will be triggered when you click on the delete button to delete the records. Then we have the processes. Processes are nothing but it's the same set of work which you are going to keep repeating it. So as it says, it's a sequence of repeatable activities executed within an organization. Processes can be simple or complex. Processes decides who and what has to be involved in fully responding to an event, how people in the enterprise collaborate to achieve a goal. Process could be anything. Okay, you have to just submit the form, there is a process for that. So no matter how many times you have to submit the form, that process needs to be followed. That's what the process is all about. Then you have the rules. Rules are used by enterprise to enforce goals and guide decision making. They determine when information associated with an entity may change, what values of information are valid, how decisions are made in a process, and what are the organization's priorities are. So rules could be that any protocol which you want to enforce in the organization. For example, if somebody is writing the business requirement document, the rule is they must write the business requirement document in the form of this, and they must have these pieces of information, this use case diagram, distribution list. All these things are something which you can make it up. That is the rule. The moment you make it as a rule, that means it gives the enforcement that if you are trying to do this work, you must follow this process to do that. So if you have a process and you made it as a rule, then that process becomes enforced to say that, okay, how to do it. So this is more from the rule. Then we have the techniques. Again, when it comes down to techniques, we are going to think about business rules analysis, data flow diagram, data modeling, functional decomposition, how that is done, how that is going to happen. All these things we are going to work like that. Okay. Now you have organizational modeling, means how that is going to work. Then you have process modeling, then you have use cases or scenarios, then you have a scope modeling and the user stories. Let's take one at a time. You have business rule analysis. Again, all these chapters, all these topics will be elaborated. First, we are going to talk about business rule analysis, what exactly it is. So now we have a rule which is tied up with a business requirement. Okay, so you have a requirement and the implementation of it. So how you are going to analyze that? You are going, let's say you have to just simply think about login page. So login page, user need a login page, that is a requirement. How you are going to implement that, that is the implementation side of it. Which means that whenever you have a requirement, you need to understand the technical side of it and you are going to work according to it to define that and achieve that requirement. The business rule may be separated from other requirements for implementation and management in a business rule engine or similar. That's what the business rule analysis is all about. Then you have the flow diagram. How the data is traveling in the current system from point A to point B, from claim engine to the member, from member to the portal, from portal to the user, to the end user. Show how information flows through a system. Each function that modifies the data should be decomposed into lower levels until the system is sufficiently described. So moreover, you are trying to understand what the data flow is so that everyone can understand it in a detailed way. Then you have the data modeling. The data modeling describes again what is the current way, current structure of the business, what is the as-is scenario, how it is working, how it is going to advance that. Okay, that's what it is. Then we have the process modeling. Process modeling is that you have a process. You have a set of, I would say, steps. How you are going to, so let's think about it. The claim processing let's talk about, okay. We need to process the claim, and to process one particular type of claim, let's say if you have an enrollment, you don't know how people are going to react to it. So what you do, you create a process. Everyone who is going to process those types of claims, they must follow the same set of rules to process those type of claims. So you are creating the standard, you are creating a process, what needs to be followed, whoever is working on it. Then you have the use cases. Use cases is nothing but to define the actor and the activity which is going to be performed or who is going to trigger that event. So you need to identify the individuals who are the actors and which are the actors which will trigger the action. So these are the two things you are going to identify as part of the use case. Then we have the scope modeling, very important for the requirement because you need to put the boundaries for the scope perspective. And why do we need a modeling? We need a modeling because, as it says, requirements may be organized based on solution components they are related to. So again, scope modeling, what you did, you identified all the requirements from the member perspective, you identified all the requirements from the payment system perspective, you identified all the requirements from the claim perspective. So now by doing that, you know what exactly is the dependency you have in your requirement and how you are going to overcome that. You can only do it when you have a pretty clear idea that, okay, requirement 1 belongs to member, requirement 2 belongs to claim, requirement 3 belongs to claim, that kind of a modeling. Then you have the user stories. User stories are nothing but in Agile or the Scrum, the requirement is called as an user story. As it says, describes the stakeholder objective that the solution will support. So again, the objective is what? Your requirement. That's what we are trying to achieve. So these are the overall techniques. Let me see if we have more. No. So let's finish it off. So these are the overall techniques what we have and what we need to understand as part of this process. Then we have the stakeholders. Stakeholders are again, stakeholders are domain subject matter experts, anyone who can positively or negatively impact the project. So all these are again stakeholders. Not getting into too details. Then we have the output. Your output is structured requirement. That's what we have got. That okay, how the requirement is going to be. That's what we have got. The output of this risk, output of this task is an organized structure for the requirements and a documented set of requirements between them. This structure is distinct from tracing, which links related requirements. Rather, the structure is used so that the analyst and the stakeholder know where a specific requirement should be found. So as you see, the structure, why do we see structure? Structure means that, okay, if the stakeholder belongs to the claim area, he should be aware of where to find the claims related information. He doesn't have to go over 300 or 500 pages every time or the plan he is looking for. He knows that, okay, if I look for the claim, I will find all the relevant requirements related to the claim. Same for the member, same for the provider area. So this is exactly, you group the requirements and you get the structured requirements so everyone know if there is a dependency, the dependency will be for the entire module, entire grouping. That is the flexibility which you get when you have some kind of a requirement structure. So that's the value which you get from the requirement, structured requirements. Any questions?
How do we write all these things? Like, you know, it's is there any, like, that's always my concern is there a specific format? Like this one, it says all, you know, the modeling and diagrams and
So here is the thing.
Okay.
Try to understand conceptually how you are using. Let's go back a little bit. Okay. So we have the output, which is the requirement structure, right? When you are writing the business requirement document, what do? We group the requirements. And why do we do that? The structure gives you the flexibility, okay? Because what happens, when we start writing the business requirement document, we'll see sometime it is 50 pages, 60 pages, and the resources who are working on, the subject matter experts or the SMEs, they are the people who are not full-time resources for the project. So they get maybe 8 hours a week to support the project or something like that. If that is the case, you must understand that the requirement has to be in such a way so that you are able to reduce their work. Think about it. If your first claim requirement is page number 5 and the another one is 150, how struggle point it would be for the claims department to read the requirement, right?
Right.
And also for you, if you are analyzing something and if you have this type of structure, you can do the better assessment from the impact analysis perspective. Because you are looking all together the same model at once. So when you will work, you will see all these differences if your requirement is scattered or if your requirement is structured. That makes a very big difference. Number one, from the requirement structure perspective. Let's go a little back. But back not allowed. Okay. Actually twice it was not moving. I was like, okay. So think about it. Here you have a process modeling, scope modeling. Okay, these are the terms. Okay.
Oh.
But as a business analyst, whether you know it or not, you do that.
Okay.
Pick anyone if you think that how it should be done.
It's which one is that? Whatever, like process modeling. So is there such a way you put it into the, that's why, you know, that's my concern. Is it, because it says diagram and, you know, modeling, so my brain started looking. Is it like a V0 kind of format? Is it something
No,
like that?
not necessarily. When it is talking about the diagram, see, there are multiple ways. If you say process modeling, okay, process modeling could be, you're talking about a process, right? Your process could have the steps as well as the diagram to simplify your steps. So think about it. Let's say you are working on the project where the claims are getting rejected because of incorrect benefit. Okay, a simple example I'm giving you. Now you are trying to fix the system. So you are going to create a solution. You are working on the requirement. So that is okay. But there could be some hiccups, right? No solution is 100% proof. So what you do is, you realize that, okay, if there are some skipped, I would say, claims, skipped claims which for some reason did not go through the process. For X number of reasons that can happen, okay? So then what you do? You need a manual workflow for the processor, claim processor, to follow it so that those claims which are not getting processed through systematically, automatically, the processor is following the same steps what you are expecting. So that means you need to create a workflow. That workflow can contain the diagram as well as the steps how you should process if the claim have the incorrect benefit. So that's a separate document which will be created, which will be part of your business requirement document, even though it has nothing to do with the technical solution. It's not a dependency. But for the overall project, it is a dependency. Why? Because if your project goes live and your process model is not ready, then what happens? Then whoever is getting those type of escaped claims will process those claims incorrectly. So now you have got into the bigger mess. Now you have the data flow diagram. Data flow diagram is that when you do the current state and the future state, anyhow you create the flow diagram, right? That's what it is. So what phase it is? Tell me. What phase it is?
Which one?
We are organizing the requirement. When you are doing it, see, there is no hard and fast, I would say, the rule book that, okay, this is number 1, this is number 2. Because if you see, when we were studying data elicitation, there were so many things which was from chapter 6, right?
Right.
So the book is created in such a way so that you are able to follow it. Because somewhere the book has to start, right, and somewhere it has to end. But it doesn't say that, okay, when you are doing the data elicitation, you can't talk about organizing the requirements. No, you have to talk about the organizing the requirement, prioritizing the requirement. You have to. So there could be the possibility first you organize your requirement and then you start using it, or first you prioritize the requirement, then only you can organize it, because then whatever you have, the way you have prioritized it, according to that you are going to organize it. Because now you have out of 10, 5 is the priority. So when you are organizing it, you just need to look at that 5, because those are the ones you have to organize and structure it.
Yeah.
Correct? So did you get that?
Yeah.
How it will be used? You will be doing things from a BA perspective, how you can use this. Then keep aside all the theoretical side what it is talking about. Forget about that. Just think how you can utilize this. Where exactly you will utilize that, and that is your answer. Clear now?
Yeah, clear.
If not, then ask me. I will give more examples to you. No, really,
No.
this is very good question that you asked, okay? So, yeah, people will have this difficulty to understand. We are talking about so many things, but how we are using it, that's the overall point. So, if you still don't get it, I will give you some more examples. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So, I would say read it again. If you still don't get it, come back.
Okay.
We'll talk about more examples and try to clarify that for you. Okay?
Okay.
So don't hesitate to ask me as many times you want to ask.
No, I will ask because I don't understand.
Yeah.
I will ask.
Yeah, sure. So that's it pretty much. Okay. And then we reconnect again on Thursday, right?
Yeah, Thursday. Right.
Yeah. So we'll continue this chapter from there.